Welcome back to Have Your Say. We're still here with Augusto and discussing the abuse of the family law system in WA or in Australia. For the start, have you got difference between the WA family law system and the Australian family law system or other states?
In many ways, they are quite similar because we have the similar legislation, federal legislation. It's called the Family Law Act.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to such things as FVO, family violence orders, and other specifics of the matter, that is actually dictated by the state legislation. Even though here in Western Australia we have something even more than that. That's the fact that the family court in Australia is not federal. It's a state federal court enforcing the Family Law Act, which happens to be a Commonwealth legislation.
Commonwealth. So, but the Commonwealth and everyone in Australia is not so happy with the family law system as well. No. So how do you see what are the core problems with the family law system in WA or in Australia?
Well, I think there is a connection between parental alienation and financial rewards. I mean, I know this to be a matter of fact because I have even ladies who are my friends, now my friends, who have become the victims of their husband's behavior. In many ways, what happens is that if you're planning the action in advance, you take a huge upper hand. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, I have my suspicion, because as a commissioner I was appalled by the behavior of some radical feminists, by the way, that they might be behind this idea, thinking that women, you take the advantage. But as a matter of fact, I know many women who have become now the victims of the domestic violence industry. I have a person, for instance, who lived in a beautiful house. She was issued with one of these restraining orders. She lost access to her property. The accuser, being the former husband, lives at her property. That's a family property that belonged to her family. Yes. And now he made these accusations that she has abused of the kids. She needs to prove it to take about 1 year or so for her to be proven to be innocent. And as a matter of fact, chances are that the magistrate will keep the custody with this person, because one of the reasons as why they do so is on the grounds that the kids got used to live with the person who made the false accusation. So the crime is inevitably is rewarded as a result. It's appalling, I must say.
So what sort of tricks we got in the book, what people are using and abusing the system? So one is the restraining order. Yes. But I'll let you explain.
But the other one is to disappear with the property, of course, like, before transfer property to the person's name and things of this nature. To be frank with you, because we have a no-fault system in Australia, matters of accountability are not taken into account.
What does it mean, no-fault system?
Well, it's called no-fault.
So no fault is in the judicial system.
So for instance, adultery is not taken into account. But the point is that if you make a huge investment in a relationship, mm-hmm. and you found out that your spouse is betraying you miserably, it's stealing the money of the family, from the family. It's perhaps even if the money is not being given to the person, that constitutes an instance of domestic violence. By the way, it's called financial abuse. Financial abuse is grounds for domestic violence. Let's say that you have a wife, for instance, who happens to have drug problems. That's not your case. But for instance, has gambling problems. If you decided to not share your bank account with her, that might be caused an instance of considered to be an instance of domestic violence, because the concept has been extended to financial and to verbal. Yes. And verbal is a very dangerous thing because it can be only one instance.
So how does it work?
Well, it's like you say something that the other person feels not comfortable with what you have said. Yes. That would be verbal. Verbal can be only one instance. Yes. That's why when Gillian Trigg said that what you say around the kitchen table is not necessary, is still a problem because you still have free speech in our kitchen table. That's not entirely true, because if you say something around the kitchen table, you can still get into trouble if the other person records what you have to say. But on the other hand, we don't need even to have anything recorded, because the need of evidence has been basically removed. So we have to take for granted whatever the person says. So if the person goes to the police and accuses you of domestic violence, she doesn't need to prove anything. Because it will be,
said, you said.
There is no need for evidence. The evidence has been dramatically removed. So you don't
Why
need
is that?
Well, because they feel that this is such a serious matter that it's better to err on the side of the accuser. That's what Harvey, that Lisa Harvey, said in an interview when she was the police minister. She had the guts to say, and that drove me mad, by the way, that we should err on the side of the accuser. Do you know, my answer to her is that you should never err. And this is a very terrible statement, because it shows that she has no knowledge of common law. Because the common law says that it's better to have 100 guilty people not in jail than to send one innocent people to jail. We have to make sure that no innocent person is the victim of the legal system, because the legal system should serve the purposes of achieving justice and justice for all. I am still an old-fashioned guy who believes that human rights are human rights for all.
You're one of the unique ones, and that human rights, unfortunately, are so used and abused by politicians and other groups of the society, knowing how powerful it is to use the word of human rights, and that's not too safe anymore. And I understand you are proud of being a human rights expert and protecting human rights, but that's really a very hard task these days.
Absolutely. And another thing is to ask the person to explain what he or she means by a human right, because the concept of human rights can be extended as well to a sort of struggle for the fittest. What we have in many ways is might makes right. I don't like this idea that if I can actually impose my will, then I can actually baptize what I want as a human right. As a matter of fact, if you have too many rights, you undermine the whole foundation of human rights, because if everything is a right, right ceases to exist. Ultimately, it's no longer important.
And there's no need to have, because everything is the right.
Yes, and another thing is that when you think about giving these rights to certain categories of people and discriminate others who are not part of the group, that's a totalitarian idea that was embraced by the Nazis, that was embraced by certain totalitarian regimes that would say that if you do not belong to the club, you have no rights whatsoever, even you might be killed by the regime, because you cease to be considered a recipient of these rights. So that's why I think you have to be very careful to make sure that everybody has access to justice, everybody has the protection of the law, everybody has the rights to life, liberty, and property protected.
On that note, I have to say, everyone has got access and equal access for the court system and for justice. Depends on
the money.
How much money you got in your pocket.
Well, another thing that I believe, one of my areas is the rule of law, and I can talk to you in another segment. But what I have to say is that access to justice is one of the major problems in this country. You need to be either very wealthy or you have to get some sort of legal aid. But if you are middle class in this country, you are totally screwed. Because if you have a legal problem, you go bankrupt.
Financially and legally.
And emotionally as well.
Hallelujah.
It's a great tragedy.
Hallelujah.
Yes.
On that note, we should finish today's discussion and hopefully see you in another time with other topics.
It will be a great pleasure.
Thank you very much, Augusto.
Thank you so much.
And don't forget, next week, same channel, same time. Have your say.